He didn't hold an annual press conference last year because things looked bad. But now President Putin is feeling confident, happy to answer questions about overthrowing the government of Ukraine, what he calls denazification and curbing Western influence.
There
will be peace when we achieve the goals that you mentioned. Let's get back to them. They don't change. Let me remind you of what we talked about: denazification, demilitarization, and neutral status.
Recent battlefield picture released by the Ukrainian armed forces shows an attempt to rescue wounded colleagues coming under heavy Russian artillery fire. The Ukrainian armoured vehicle is stuck in the mud, so they tie the tourniquet in a foxhole. They're near Bakhmut, where the Russians have successfully maintained their defensive positions throughout the Ukrainian counteroffensive.
Our armed forces, let's put it modestly, are improving their position. Almost everyone is in an active posture along the entire front line.
And he's hoping that Ukraine's American and European backers will soon lose interest.
Today, Ukraine produces almost nothing. They're trying to salvage something, but they get freebies all the time. Sorry for my language. But those freebies will end someday. Little by little, this is coming to an end.
But in a surprise move in Brussels today, European leaders said they would start membership accession talks for Ukraine. The Hungarian leader Viktor Orban, who's an ally of President Putin, absented himself from the room while the decision was made. He's been allowed 10 billion euros in frozen EU funds, but it's not clear if he extracted anything else for his acquiescence. He's still trying to limit Ukraine's access to 50 billion desperately needed euros.
Ukraine is in peril. Ukraine will not stand without support and ongoing support from both the European Union and the US, the two towers of freedom and democracy in the world. And if Ukraine doesn't have support from the EU and the US, well, then Putin will win, and all of the consequences that flow for the world after that.
Earlier, President Zelensky had made his case to EU leaders.
Dear colleagues, today is the day when determination will either be in Brussels or Moscow. People in Europe will not understand if Putin's satisfied smile becomes the reward for a meeting in Brussels.
What has any of this got to do with the price of eggs? That's what a caller in Dagestan asked President Putin. 220 rubles for a dozen. It's daylight robbery. That was a permitted question. No one asked the whereabouts of imprisoned opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who hasn't been heard of for more than a week.
Vladimir Vladimirovich, здравствуйте.
Maybe Russia needs two Putins, as shown in the press conference generated by AI. Vladimir Vladimirovich will not be pleased with today's EU move, and nor will his body double.
Well, earlier I spoke to Arkady Ostrovsky, who's Russia editor at The Economist and has known Russia's opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, for many years. I began by asking if he thought Putin would feel at all threatened by the EU's move.
Well, remember, this is what Putin is fighting this war against. He's fighting this war against Ukraine being in Europe. He's fighting this war against his own people wanting to be part of Europe and part of that normal civilized world. So I won't say that it will threaten him because he's already at war and he still thinks he can prevail militarily. And as I said, the crucial thing is not the accession talk. That's very important. It's symbolic. It's a path. Right. It's important for modernization of Ukraine. But Ukraine is at war. And what really matters at this moment is that the US Congress votes on the military package, the 60 billion of military aid to Ukraine, and the EU disperses the money and votes on the money that Ukraine needs to keep its economy going.
So clearly Putin sees kind of backsliding in the US and the EU. He cut a very emboldened figure, didn't he, at the press conference today? What did you make of it?
Yes, he did look rather confident, and he boasted about the number of men he's managed to round up and buy, basically, and send into the war, about the benefits it's bringing for the economy, how it's growing. And actually, bizarrely, he talked about how good it is that Russia has now the lowest ever unemployment. Of course, the reason it has the lowest ever unemployment rate is because a lot of young men, some being killed, a lot of people being killed, hundreds of thousands. The US says, more than 300,000. And of course, hundreds of thousands have fled Russia in fear of mobilization.
And given those figures, there is significant domestic unease, isn't there? And he was trying to use today to calm that unease. How deep is that sense of concern amongst the Russian public, as far as we know?
So what we do know, Kathy, is that there is a growing tiredness of this war. I wouldn't say, it's unease, it's a state of shock. And in some ways, Russia has been a shock since he launched this full-scale invasion 2 years ago. For the first time, we're seeing the number of people who want this war to end prevail over the number of people who wanted to continue. The turbo patriots, those who want Russia to carry on fighting, is only about 15–20%. And a lot of people don't know what they think. They comply because of propaganda, because of fear, and because he managed to keep the economy on the whole afloat. But that's not an indefinite resource. And so there is a sense of a dead end, really, with him.
Right. And he made his first comments on the detained Wall Street Journal reporter, Evan Gershkovich. Nothing on the opposition politician, Alexei Navalny, who I know you know well. He's in prison, but we don't know his whereabouts. What are your fears? What do you know about that?
What we know is, and the timing here is very interesting, Kathy, on the last time anybody heard from Alexei Navalny was on the 7th of December. That was when Alexei Navalny basically called on his supporters in the country to oppose Putin's farcical re-election. Effectively, he launched his anti-Putin election campaign before Putin even said he was running. And then the next day, only Putin slipped in this comment, yes, he is going to stand. So Navalny can't fight for the votes of his supporters, for the votes of the Russian people, because he's behind bars, so he's barred from that. But he knows he can fight for their minds, and this is what Putin fears. One thing that Russia is not short of is the number of prisons. And what I fear is they will be transferring him from one place to another, and we might not hear from him for days or weeks.
Arkady Ostrowski, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.